We are now live.
Hello, everyone. This meeting is being conducted with a virtual component. Anyone wishing to address the board virtually may join the meeting online at https://mountainview.zoom.us/j/810-4755219 or by dialing 669-900-9128 and entering webinar ID 8104-7552-190. When the chair announces the item on which you wish to speak, click the raise hand feature in Zoom or dial *9 on your phone. When the chair calls your name to provide public comment, if you are participating via phone, please press *6 to unmute yourself. Any emails received by 4:30 p.m. today were forwarded to the PSAB. Emails received after 4:30 p.m. will not be read during the meeting, but will be entered into the record for the meeting. Now it is time for roll call. Ms. Ramberg, can you take roll, please?
Happily, Chair Wang is absent today with a pre-noticed and unexcused absence. And then calling the roll for Vice Chair Tang. Member Ayer.
Here.
Member Brodowski. Yeah. Member Frink.
Present.
Member Langton.
Yeah.
And Member Souter.
Present. Time for minutes approval for our minutes from April 27th. Does anyone have any comments or questions about the meeting minutes? Seeing as there are no questions, would anyone like to make a motion to approve the meeting minutes?
I approve the minutes of last time. Second.
And for roll call?
Yes. Member Brodowski.
Yes.
Vice Chair Tang.
Aye.
Member Ayer.
Yes.
Member Langton.
Yes.
And Member Souter.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Point of order. Assistant City Manager Ramberg, I believe Member Brodowski did not get to vote.
Oh, Member Frink. Member
Frink, sorry, I knew somebody
I
missed it.
was
My apologies.
looking at you because you were looking at me. Member Frink.
I'll stop doing that.
Okay, thank you. Motion carries. Thank you for that point of order. Chief Canfield. See what he's doing? He gets promoted to chief and he's already
Keeping us in check.
keeping us in check.
Point of ordering everyone around.
All right. Item 4 is oral communications from the public. This portion of the meeting is reserved for persons wishing to address the advisory board on any matter not on the agenda. Speakers are allowed to speak on any topic for up to 3 minutes during this section. State law prohibits the PSAB from acting on non-agendized items. Would any member of the public like to provide comment on an item that is not on the agenda? If so, please submit a blue card, or if on Zoom, click the raise hand feature or dial *9 on your phone.
We have one online. Margaret
Petros.
Margaret Petros, please make your comment.
Yes, good evening. My name is Margaret Petros. I'm the executive director with the nonprofit Mothers Against Murder. Our mission is to protect victims' rights, prevent violence from occurring in our communities, empower our community members to speak up, come forward, to participate in the justice system in order to have a safer community. We work mostly in Santa Clara County, but we do get calls and requests from victims from around the state. And we really care about what's happening with the gun violence in our communities, and especially advocating for common sense legislations that really can prevent gun violence and also specifically hold accountable those who are using illegal guns. This evening, I wanted to bring to your attention a case that happened in Mountain View that involved a gun at Brinkstrove Park nearly 2 years ago, on September 15, 2021. It happened around 1 p.m. in the afternoon, where there were families and children there. A couple of different gangs, two different groups had an argument, and then a gun was used where a couple of people were shot. We think the Mountain View Police Department did an excellent job. They were there. There were many officers who worked hard to very quickly make an arrest. And they lured the suspect in by saying they found the lost dog that the family had. This case was in the paper. And somehow, maybe the public thinks that it was related to the missing dog, but it has nothing to do with the missing dog. That's what the police smart tactic used to get the suspect in, and they even retrieved the gun, which was really an amazing work. He was arrested, criminally charged with several felonies, and it took nearly
10 seconds, please.
Court time. Well, the conclusion is 90 to 120 days jail times for this person. And the question is, are we really caring about our community? How is it that such a light sentence can happen? He's been out and about. And what's more alarming to me is the names of some victims and the witnesses are public records. They were not redacted.
Thank you, Ms. Petros. Your time is up.
Thank you.
May I ask a question?
What is the question?
I'd like to know the name of the organization that Ms. Petros is representing.
Mothers Against Murder. Mothers Against Murder.
Thank you.
Are there any other members of the public wishing to make public comment? Okay. We will now close the oral communication item and move to discussion/action items. To facilitate participation by all PSAB members, I will be recognizing in turn each member who signals they are ready to speak. After all members who wish to speak on an item have done so, I will recognize members who have additional comments. So we will be moving on to 5.1, the School Resource Officer / Youth Services Unit Annual Report. Youth Services Unit Sergeant David Chen and Lieutenant Wahid McGee will present the SRO / YSU Annual Report for fiscal year 2023.
All right, perfect. PSAB board members, thank you for having me here. Assistant City Manager Ramberg, Ms. Schultz. It's my pleasure to be here. Just to introduce myself real quick, my name is David Shen. I am a sergeant for the Youth Services Unit. So if you knew Scott Thomas, I am the new Scott Thomas. As I was mentioning earlier, just the same height, exactly 6'6". But if you met him previously, that's the role that I've stepped into. A quick introduction, don't want to bore you guys too much, but stepped into the role kind of the tail end of the school year, so about March, and have been in the unit ever since. I'm kind of juggling the two screens here, so work with me. Yes. Turn it off and on again. Normal trick.
All right.
While he's working on that, I appreciate everyone having us here today. I'm Wahid McGee, Police Lieutenant. I know most of you. And so I came here to support Sergeant Shen on this presentation from a historical perspective as well. So the work we did with the SRO manual and all of your input and help in developing that.
So we're not seeing you in your uniform then?
Correct.
All right, so we'll take a look at the agenda. Obviously, we've done our introductions. We'll go over the YSU overview of values, goals, outcomes, training, take a look at our regular programs and activities, our partnership, and then we'll dive into some of the data. So that's going to include our school visit data, our home visit data, arrest details, and a slide that's what the unit looks like moving forward. And obviously, I think the most important section is we want to make sure that we have time for question and answers. I know a lot of this information that I'll be providing, obviously all board members have such a good context already. So I do want to make sure that I don't want to breeze through it, but I want to make sure that I'm not spending too much time on some areas that you may have already heard. Moving forward. Just talking a little bit about the youth services unit, in how that unit is comprised and the values. So again, it's one sergeant, myself, 3 SROs. The SROs are currently SRO James Guevara, SRO Thomas Lowe, and SRO Guillermo Delira. We also have an excellent program coordinator, Liz Mendez, and then we're also assisted by a group of police assistants. Talking a little bit about the values of the youth services unit, I like to kind of take a look at it as we are the table, the top end of the table, and the values are the legs. So building trust, safe school community, restorative justice, and empowering youth. And through our programming that we offer, that's how we hope to deliver on each one of these tenets that we have that are like my analogy of the legs on the table. Again, when we talk about the legs on the table, you need all 4 of them to be able to have a successful unit to provide and support for the youths of Mountain View. So for instance, in order to have restorative justice and provide restorative justice in how we deliver or how we deal with the incidents that come up, you already have to have trust. You already have to have a safe school community, right? So all 4 of these things must exist for us to be able to accurately and efficiently deliver on any of them. Some of the goals of the youth services unit is obviously create a safe school. Oh, I only did mine. Create a safe school environment. So not only physically, having the youths feel like they're physically safe, protecting them from anything that may harm them, especially some of the unfortunate tragedies that we see currently on the news, but also from a mental standpoint, right? And that also includes our presence. We're very understanding to the fact that our presence can potentially be traumatic to some based on maybe some generational trauma. And we want to be respectful of that in how we deliver our programming, in our interactions, in our relationships with the staff and the youths. To do that, we want to make sure, and one of our greatest goals within the youth services unit is we want to reduce our referrals to the criminal justice system. So what that means is when an incident comes up that involves a student, we look beyond what I call kind of the Band-Aid method of going there, letter of the law, you're arrested, or here's a cite, right? We want to look beyond that. And I feel like we've done that with, and we'll take a look at some of the data points. Really go there, be able to have discussions, build relationships with these youths, refer them to some of the program that we have, and really get to the root of the problem and use these positive relationships to be able to support them as best that we can. Obviously, preventing and reducing juvenile delinquency, again, through our programming, through our home visits, through our positive relationships. And we want to do so in kind of a proactive fashion. Many of the youths that are referred to us are, can be classified as at risk. And we want to make sure that we build these relationships early because that's where they're the most effective, especially when it comes to our programming. Lastly, it's positive engagement and relationship with the school community. So again, that's looking beyond just the students. Obviously, the students and the youths are our main goal, but that really extends. And in order to, again, be able to effectively have these relationships with them, we know that we have to extend our relationship with the families. We need to be collaborative with the school administration. And I think one of the big things is we have to listen. We have to listen and we have to learn. I think in law enforcement, we tend to have the mindset of wanting to solve everything on our own. And when it comes to youths and when it comes to really fostering these positive relationships and helping them grow, we want to make sure that we're also partnering with, again, the community, with community experts when it comes to different kind of subject matter experts for different issues. That's our approach to meeting that goal. Some of the outcomes, and yeah, you can see it when I switch anyway. So So some of the outcomes, keep in mind that this is a very quantitative view of our outcomes. We'll have a chance to talk about the qualitative ends. I think that's one of the unique things about the youth services unit and the work that we do with the youths is a lot of the results you're going to see at a qualitative level. In totality, we've done 264 sessions of SRO-led events, which really reached a total of approximately 2,000, a little over 2,000 participants. There were 113 SRO, I call them SRO-assisted incidents for this past school year, resulting in 2 custodial arrests and 1 JCR, which is a juvenile contact report. And I can explain this a little bit more in depth later, but this is you could see it as a citation or a notice to appear before JPD, which is a juvenile probation department. We conducted a total of 61 home visits, 27 having to do with truancy, 15 support, 16 wellness checks, and 3 intervention. Again, we'll have a separate slide where we'll dive a little bit deeper into what exactly that means. Approximately and anecdotally, 200 vaping devices seized. I will get into that again, but this is certainly one of the areas that we're putting a lot of energy in for this upcoming school year, and one of the issues that we're seeing within the schools in our city. Very, very, very common problem amongst not only schools within our county, but also outside of county. So it's really how I see it, it's a nationwide trend, unfortunately. Go to the next one. Now we talk about the training that our school resource officers have completed for the past school year for 2022-2023. In totality for that school year, they've completed upwards of 154 hours of SRO training. So what that comprises of is, and I'll explain right here, School Safety Symposium, which has to do with increasing school connectedness with students, methods for decreasing bullying and utilizing behavioral threat assessment. One of the big ones when we talk about physical safety, and one of the ones that our unit and our department takes very seriously on an annual basis, is active shooter training and prevention. So not only does it go over the tactical response to a potential active shooter incident, but it also talks about emergency medical care, also collaboration and deployment with our fire department personnel. And in addition to that, some kind of warning signs to look for that maybe can help with prevention of active shooter incidents. One of my favorite ones is the Stanford Cannabis Conference and Tobacco Toolkit Symposium. I'll go into that a little bit later when we talk about our partnerships, but we've actually partnered with what's called the Stanford Reach Lab, which is run by a doctor that provides the latest research on cannabis and the effects of cannabis on the body. It also provides further understanding of the intersect between tobacco and cannabis and how to apply early intervention strategies. Now, the new view around that, I think we all know the old view of DARE and prevention. This new method is a harm reduction method. And really what that means is we have some level of understanding that experimentation or use is going to happen. And I mean, among youths, it's quite common. How to give them a harm reduction mindset, be smart about their use or their experimentation. De-escalation for SROs, very, very important. Obviously, de-escalation is in general, but this specific one for school resource officers offers training that's kind of beyond basic police de-escalation. Which I'd like to say that in our department, all MVPD officers are trained in, but it also further applies concepts that's specific to youths in use of communication, negotiation, and reduction of escalation and aggression or potential use of force situations. So it really is specific to that school environment. Crisis intervention training. So again, this is going to be the more comprehensive 40-hour crisis intervention training. So not only is it just limited to de-escalation and understanding of subjects who may be experiencing a mental crisis, but on top of that, it's identifying factors attributed to common disorders, suicide prevention, and on top of that, understanding of neurodiverse persons that can be commonly mistaken for mental crises. And the last one, again, this is just a snapshot of some of the training. Obviously, there are substantially more, but the Silicon Valley ICAC So that's going to be Silicon Valley Internet Crimes Against Children. I actually got that on the first try, so let that be noted. Vigilant Parent Initiative. So that provides education regarding social media and technology exploitation, prevention, and awareness, right? So we know the big kicker these days, or the big transition, is social media is the life of youth these days, right? And when we talk about things like substance abuse or mental health crises, or even more issues that they unfortunately have to deal with, there's always the one commonality. Social media always falls within there, right? So this also provides education on how to educate them from a parenting perspective on protecting themselves online. Go to the next slide. Community partnerships. So as I previously mentioned, we did partner with Stanford Reach Labs, and Reach stands for, it's a long one, it's Research and Education to Empower Adolescents and Young Adults to Choose Health. I don't know how they got that down the reach, but they did. So we've partnered with them to have continuing conversations in regards to youth substance abuse, specifically surrounding the new and trending issue of nicotine or cannabis use through accessible vape pens and devices, which we've seen everywhere. We work closely in collaboration with Dr. Bonnie Halpern in creating and optimizing their harm reduction curriculum. So it's really a symbiotic relationship. Not only are we getting the latest research and data directly from a source at Stanford, which is very impressive, but we're also providing kind of the boots on the ground look of what the playing field looks like from a current perspective, right? What are kids using? What are the devices that they're using? How are they getting it? So again, a very symbiotic relationship. We've done events with Prognia. Scroll down a little bit here, which is an organization that helps the neurodiverse community interact comfortably with members of law enforcement. Not only is that the case, but it also, I think more importantly on our end, it helps members of law enforcement comfortably interact with members of the neurodiverse community. And this is done through neurodiverse youths coming, and there's interactive demonstrations and presentations. Like I said, the learning benefit goes both ways. And we are looking forward to events this upcoming school year and partnering with them as well. Challenge team, I'm sure you're all aware of. We regularly facilitate and attend monthly challenge team meetings. Our SROs are regularly there for every meeting. And one of our beliefs of the unit is for the ability for us to listen to our school and larger city community. So this really provides a platform for members of the community, to include us, to not only learn from each other, but to build collaborative bonds with the ultimate goal of empowering and fostering new opportunities and outlets for our youths. This last challenge team meeting was especially eye-opening because it had a panel of Mount View Los Altos High students come and really talk about what their current stressors are. And to hear it from the students themselves, I think is really eye-opening, and we can certainly find ways to leverage both our learning and hopefully work in those learnings within our YSU programming. Last but not least, and certainly not exclusive to this list, is safe routes to schools. Obviously, bike safety has continued to be one of our main concerns, main goals for not only this past school year, but our school year moving forward. I think consistently every school year, bike safety is high on our radar. So recent tragedies obviously have made this message even more clear, and we need to leverage everything we can when it comes to bike safety for our youths. So we've partnered with them to provide bike safety and enforcement presentations. And at the same time, we've also been able to provide essential bike helmets to those families and those youths in need. So moving on to some of our regular YSU programs. Again, I'll try not to spend too much time. I'm sure you're familiar with the majority of these programs. We'll start off with our Dreams and Futures, which by far is our largest annual program held during the summer. So Dreams and Futures is 18 daily sessions per summer. So it's going to be 2 weeks for our elementary school kids and 2 weeks for our middle school kids. Now, how these kids come into our program is they're referred to us by at-risk counselors, our SCEPs, our APs, for kids that may be experiencing, potentially maybe some behavioral issues or some social issues that they feel may best benefit from this program. And out of that list, we select the kids that we think would best benefit from this program. So a total of 128 participants. We actually have 40 counselors. So these counselors can be high school age. They're generally about high school age, right about going into college aged youths. And really kind of the neat point about this number is out of the 40 counselors that we had this past year, 24 of them were actually past participants of Dreams and Futures. PAL mentoring, I'm sure you're aware of. We've held a total of 54 sessions for this past school year at Mauna Loma and Castro Elementary Schools. Total of about 38 participants with weekly meetings. Again, very similar to Dreams and Futures. They're referred to us by, again, at-risk counselors, staffs, administration, and we have a regular relationship with them where we go and we do presentations, we do sports with them, and I would say a good portion of these kids end up kind of floating into our Dreams and Futures program as well. ROAR mentoring, which again is a PAL mentoring program that we've actually rolled out to our Graham Middle School in the first year for the last school year for 2022-2023. So to go over that real quick, it's new this year, 30 participants weekly meeting. The unique thing about the ROAR mentoring program is we take a group of mentors, which is taken directly from Graham Middle School, and they've been identified by administrators as kind of your exemplary leadership exhibiting students, for lack of a better term. And then you take another subset of potentially at-risk students. So this is different from PAL mentoring because we're putting the onus on the leaders to go ahead and to run almost a PAL mentor-esque program for these at-risk youths. What we hope to happen is we hope to see sort of a pay it forward effect. So we want to see, our goal is we want to see these youths that were participants in ROAR mentoring move their way into counselors, right? So I think we're looking beyond just providing mentoring directly from us, but really empowering these youths to be able to provide it to their peers, which I think is the rewarding aspect of this. Vaping education, we did a total of approximately about 8 presentations to 350 attendees across our middle school and elementary schools. Our Run, Hide, Defend training, that's specific to potential active shooter incidents. We run a program where we teach kind of the Run, Hide, Defend tactic. And we've run about 15 presentations across multiple schools. This is K through 12. Also the adult school and to MOC within our city as well. Vaping education, I don't think it went over. Oh, I did, I'm sorry. Home visits. So we do have a separate slide for that. I'll go into a little bit more depth in that. For the 2022-23 school year, we did approximately 61 home visits. PAL Boxing is a program that we also run that again goes beyond just teaching kids how to box. It's certainly not about fighting. But we take, again, a group of at-risk kids, we refer them to where one of our SROs actually runs a boxing program where we've run approximately 54 sessions with approximately 30 participants on a weekly basis. And Cops That Care and Kids Spree, I'm sure you're very familiar with that. Once a year, a participant with over 1,000 participants, again, identified families and youths that can need a little bit more, almost like a giving tree type program where we provide to these kids. And the Kids Spree, again, are children within our community, within our schools that don't have adequate winter clothing, identified by our school administrators. And then we go and basically took them to Kohl's and bought them all their winter clothing needs. All right, we'll get into meat and potatoes. So regular programs, I think I actually inadvertently went over most of this, but here we have an at a glance look, again, of our total sessions and participants. And we can certainly refer back to this if there's any further questions about that. So this is actually the meat and potatoes. So we talk about our school visits and purpose. I think one of the things or a lot of the energy around previous discussions are how many times our SROs are going to campus and what's the purpose of them going to campus. So we did take a really deep dive into the data collection that we had. When I first got back into the unit, took a deep dive into the data. Took a while, took a lot of massaging out, and certainly I think there are areas within our data collection that can be improved upon, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. But as we talk about our classifications for the past school year, we've kind of split it into the following classifications. So that's going to be school initiated. So when I talk about school initiated, that's going to mean a request by school staff or administrators for SRO response. There's going to be dispatched, which is a call to MVPD communications to which SROs respond. Obviously, because when the call comes out, they know that it has to do with the school, and the normal responses are SROs will step up and take that call. Administrative meetings, so that's going to be SRO and school staff meetings. Primarily, this number, which is about 10, is really limited to program-related meetings. So as these referrals come in, most of them had to do with Dreams and Futures. We meet with them and we talk about some of the youths that they refer over to us. YSU program, pretty self-explanatory. That's going to be our facilitation of our YSU program. So again, whether it's our PAL mentoring, whether it's our ROAR programs, et cetera, it's going to be for our programming needs, and that's why the SROs are going to be on campus. Incident follow-up, so that's going to be potential follow-up on incidents or issues that SROs initially handled. And then this proactive number, which is about 10, this is a general visit that's not classified by any other means. And these are primarily related to our elementary schools. So as we all know, elementary school kids really like to see police officers and firefighters, probably more police officers, in uniform. So that's a joke. So they like to see them in uniform, and those are kind of like your unscheduled visits to the campuses. I do want to put an asterisk on this number. This number can be a little bit greater. I think we could have done a little bit better job in formally recording specifically our visits to like our elementary schools. So this number may be a little bit larger. I'd like to think it's bigger than 10. So that's my little subnote to that data point. As we talk about our 280 school visits by purpose, hopefully these colors are showing up okay on the screen. About 50% are about 50, now the blues are mixing up. Yeah, right. 50% are school initiated. 50% are YSU programs. Apologies on that. 50% are YSU programming, 37% are school initiated, 10% is administrative meetings, 2% is dispatched, 2% is also incident follow-up, and 2% is proactive. Now we'll jump into the juvenile arrest section of our presentation. So when a SRO responds to the school for an incident, and if it is potentially a criminal or potentially not a criminal matter, there are, vary from like a simplistic view, there's three options. There's admonishment or counseling, issuance of a juvenile contact report, and physical or custodial arrest. And this one would be specific to actually a criminal matter. So what that means is the issuance of a juvenile contact report. If there is a violation or a law violation, there is a potential decision that can be made where they're given what's called the juvenile contact report. In layman's terms, it's a citation and it's a notice to appear before the Juvenile Probation Department of Santa Clara County. A physical arrest is exactly as it is. It's a custodial arrest. Exactly self-explanatory, custodial arrest. So the school resource officers do hold the responsibility and decision of detaining and arresting minors, respective to state law and our standard operating procedures and general orders, while collaboration with school personnel and SROs, as understanding of student needs can impact the decision to arrest. The responsibility to arrest lies solely on the school resource officer. I think my slides got, actually we'll go to the details. I think it got jumbled. That's my fault. So we'll go to the details on the 3 arrests. Oh, sorry, it's forward. Perfect, thank you. So in the 2022-2023 school year, there have been 3 arrests as detailed, and the case numbers are there. So the first one was possession of cannabis. The age of the minor was 15. Details were school administration contacted SRO regarding possession of a vape pen. School officials performed a search revealing 7.7 grams of cannabis. This disposition was a JCR was issued and the student was released to the custody of the school. In this specific situation, that particular minor was someone that we have had kind of an ongoing relationship with. There had been multiple calls, multiple issues of the same thing revolving around possession of vape pens, both cannabis and nicotine, unfortunately. And this was kind of the ultimate disposition after repeat instances of possession. The second, which I'm sure everyone has heard about, was the incident at one of the local high schools, which was unfortunately a PC 6641A7, which was an attempted murder. The age of the minor was 17. And this one was routed directly through our emergency communications center. Basically a 911 call regarding a stabbing of a student. That one did, of course, result in physical custodial arrest. Now, the last one is kind of interesting because it was school related. It was a possession of a dagger on school grounds. Specifically, that dagger was one where it was incredibly dangerous. It was one of the types where if you push a button, it spring loads the blade right out, where we can't even legally carry that type of edged weapon. This one, it was actually not a minor. It was a 5th year student that was actually 18. The disposition of this case was a physical arrest. This one, the decision was made primarily because of the egregiousness of the weapon and the just general school safety concern of possessing that on campus. So out of the 3 arrests, one of the more important things to talk about is the 3 arrests made up 3% of the incidents that we had related to our school campuses. So that's going to be out of a total of 113 either administratively requested for SRO presence or dispatched. School-related incidents reported either to our dispatch or passed along to our SROs from school staff or administrators. 3, which is approximately 3%, have resulted in issuance of JCR or arrest. I'd like to think this is reflective of our restorative justice principles and approach, where really when we talk about things like JCR issuance, custodial arrests, we really want that to be our last ditch effort. We generally, most of these incidents are resolved with some level of counseling with SROs, and then potentially administrative handling by school administration. I do want to note that how school hands out how they administratively handle these incidents, SROs are not involved in. That's solely on the schools themselves. We can jump all the way back to home visits. Thanks. So 61 home visits for the year. This one was a little bit difficult to tease out because a lot of these are overlapping, right? I would like to think that most of our home visits for this past year were truancy related. As you can imagine, when it's truancy related, there tends to be a lot of other factors that contribute. So we did the best that we could in parsing this out. So we said 27 truancy related, 15 related to support, whether it's performance in school, whether it's behavioral issues. 16 are related to wellness, just kind of wellness checks for the kids. Again, a lot of the origin was actually kind of truancy related, but I think there was an aspect enough of a wellness check that we can parse that out. And then 3 were intervention. To talk about the intervention piece a little bit, that would be a situation where, if there was a youth that was in class and maybe has said something that was a little concerning coming to potential school violence, That's when SROs would perform a home check or a home visit to make sure that, obviously school safety is paramount. We want to make sure that that potential or perceived threat is not viable. And then a further investigation and intervention is done. I want to stress that these home visits are always done with the parents in mind. If at any point, if there's a home visit where a parent or a juvenile says, I'm done with this, I'm out of this, we do not force ourselves on these visits. They end right there. But these 61 home visits, these are kind of how we've classified them. We can go to moving forward. Thank you. Moving forward, I think going through and really compiling this annual report was beneficial not only to of course have this data moving forward. I think one of the things that we want to see, or one of my goals personally within the unit, is really see that year-over-year data, right? How do these things change? How do we determine what success looks like? And I think that's always been the challenge for something that can be so qualitative. But also, one of our main things is we want to improve our data collection and outcome reporting, right? Looking at some of the data, looking at the program we use, while I think is a great start for our first year reporting, I think there's certain aspects where we can be incredibly more robust, right? So we talk about automatically going in there and detailing without having someone physically go in and parse out, whether it's school initiated, whether it's dispatched. We also want to make sure that we're keeping track of what are we seizing better? How are these searches being done? I can anecdotally tell you how they're being done. Most of them are being done by school staff administrators when there's a clue of potential contraband, or it's done by, for instance, the dagger portion. If an SRO has become aware that a youth may be unfortunately in possession of a dagger, in that case, we'll perform that portion of a search for safety purposes. But we do want to make sure that that's reported out on the front end. That's certainly one of the areas that we want to improve on. We want to make sure that we have increased vaping and substance education and prevention. This is clearly one of the trends that we've been seeing rise throughout the school year moving forward, and we want to make sure that we have efforts in that. I'll be honest with you, to me, it's alarming. We want to continue that education, especially when it's parent facing, and continue discussions with students, work in partnership with the REACH lab, and really kind of push the harm reduction mindset. Bicycle safety, pretty self-explanatory, but we want to make sure we continue our efforts over there and continue training on trending issues. So moving forward, I can tell you, at least for the 2023-24 school year, this just beginning school year, we've already started some of our trauma-informed practices for, we've started training for trauma-informed practices. So we've actually collaborated with our local high school, Mount View High. So our SROs can actually get access to some of the training that the teachers use. So that includes some of the things that we don't see a lot out there for law enforcement purposes, right? But we want to make sure that we're ahead of the game, especially when it comes to trauma-informed practices for middle schoolers, for our high schoolers, for our elementary school kids. We've also put some effort into identifying SROs to attend the 40-hour crime prevention through environmental design course, continued active shooter preparedness, and then student threat assessment processes and protocols. Moving forward, again, I know there was a lot of energy and specifically point out an area for improvement on our end. When we talk about things like the more formal quarterly meetings with our schools and our school administrators, with the surveys that we want to push out, again, our regular surveys to them, we want to make sure that we're building that in for this next school year. We certainly do understand the importance of it. We want to make sure that we have that collaborative feedback. Again, that goes back to, we know that we can't, us as law enforcement, we need the collaboration. We need these partnerships moving forward to be successful. We understand that, and we want to make sure that we're getting the proper feedback, especially when it comes to our programming for this past year, for this current year, for the years moving forward, to be better equipped to really understand what can put us in a situation for success. Outside of that, just real quick before we jump into questions and answers, we can go to the contact information. At any point, if anybody would like to contact me directly, again, I'm really looking for these discussions. I'm very open to these discussions to see how we can improve things moving forward. We have contact information on the screen. Feel free to pull me aside. Outside of that, we can jump into our questions and answers.
All right, thank you, Sergeant Chen and Lieutenant McGee. Do board members have any questions before I open this item to public comment? And I'm reminding everyone, including myself, this is for questions, and there will be a time for comments.
I have about 6 or 7.
Sure.
You talked about the vaping devices, and
Yes.
you said 50 of the 200 were donated to Stanford. What happened to the other 150?
Yeah, so the other ones that we just seize and process per our own protocol.
What does that mean?
So we keep them, so we seize them at our department, and they're appropriately processed via our evidence or our normal protocols that we process within our department. So we keep those devices.
They're subsequently destroyed once we're
Yes.
done if they're not needed for a case.
Okay, that's.
Yeah, not for use.
Thanks for undoing the double speak. Okay. You said that Stanford Reach has ideas about managing kids who are experimenting with drugs.
Yeah, so
Okay.
I think the mindset around that is, I think nationwide, and please correct me if I'm wrong, nationwide, we've kind of seen an evolution of our old DARE program, right? DARE program, I remember back when I was a kid, I went through it, I ate a cake after that had DARE on it. The mindset was stop kids from using, right? So the whole curriculum was based on stop kids from using. The Stanford Reach mindset and curriculum is more about harm reduction. So if youths choose to experiment, how to do it safely, how to do it with proper certain safety nets in place, be smart about what you're using, be smart about what substance you're using may contain, right? And I think a lot of what we're seeing these days, especially with the horrible introduction of fentanyl within our school systems, I think even across the nation, I think there's a lot of ignorance around that, and there needs to be more education around that to keep our kids safe.
And on that issue, how about is Narcan being used in the high school? And if not, why not? And well, which drugs is it effective? I don't think it's
Yes.
effective
So
for
I can-
fentanyl, is it?
Yes, so I can actually answer that. So it is being offered in the high schools. Narcan, which is also, I think the term for it is naloxone. It's useful for opiates. So that would be fentanyl and other opiates specific to that.
I just want to. So just to add to that, it was the SR program that initiated proactively getting Narcan into the schools. And so that's from the high school, middle school, into the elementary school, especially during a shortage countywide. We made sure that we expressed the need for it and they came through for it. So just want to make sure I highlight that.
So also in elementary schools, it's available.
Correct.
That's scary. So you talked about you use mentors for the middle schools to help kids at risk.
Yes.
And did you say something about a first impression?
That's the first time that we've rolled out that program for Grant Middle School. That may be.
Okay. So what are the 2 or 3 of the clues that make you think that you should be intervening in a kid with a kid in some way?
So I think what that may be is the kid, you're talking about the kids that are identified for the program.
Mm.
So those ones are referred directly to us by either SCEFs or the at-risk counselors. So very similar to,
SCEF is.
I always forget that that term. It's more or less kind of an at-risk counselor.
It's an interventionalist.
It's a school community, and I forgot the other two,
Yeah.
but
Engagement, I think, or something.
Engagement, that's what it is, yeah.
thank you.
It's a unit that does something.
Yeah, so very similar to Dreams and Futures, our mentoring programs.
They're typically bilingual and very in touch with the Spanish speaking community.
You said that you had only 10 proactive visits, home visits, school visits in the last year.
Yeah, so
I think that should be increased.
I think you're right. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think the data captured about 10. I think that number should be substantially more, especially specific to our elementary school kids. And I think that's a data collection issue that can be better improved on our end. So certainly, as far as the normal practice of us going out to elementary school kids, just doing a simple school visit, I think that number is underreported by our system. Again, I think our unit needs to do a better job in self-admittedly.
I think two things, you can visit more and you can keep track.
Yes, we certainly are visiting the elementary schools a lot. I can tell you right now, it's more than 10.
Why do you think it should be increased, Joe? Because proactive is not, it's unscheduled YSU program.
This is correct.
Right?
Yeah, so if
Why do you think unscheduled should be higher?
Point of order, we should keep the questions to the questions and not talk to each other like we're doing.
To talk to her.
During discussion part, which would be after.
Okay, point of order taken.
Final
Only
question,
because I'm the worst at it.
final question. How did you find out about the kid with the dagger?
I personally have knowledge of it. So basically,
Yeah, but how'd you get that knowledge?
How did PD know about?
about the dagger. Oh, I'm
Yeah.
sorry. So how that case worked out was the specific youth in question, there was some inkling that they may have substances on them. In that case, it was a vape device. Through the discovery of the vape device, it was told to the school administrator that unfortunately that youth also had a knife on them. At that point, we did have an SRO on site. And at that point, they intervened and performed the rest of the search specifically for that knife from a safety perspective. And it was at that point that that knife was recovered, or dagger was recovered.
Oh, let's see if I can translate that.
Sure.
There was a teacher or somebody, some school administrator who was getting the vape stuff from the kid.
Yes,
And either the kid told him or he felt a dagger and then he asked for help. Is that?
that's
how it went?
correct. Yes, that's
Okay.
correct.
Thank you. All right, that's the end of my questions.
And if I can, real quick, just to clarify, SCAF, Liz Mendez, that's watching, relayed school and community engagement facilitator.
Thanks, Liz.
Thanks, Liz.
I saw board member Souders hand first.
I just have one question for the school visits, the school initiative. Is that the school initiating that, or is that the SROs initiating those? And is that a scheduled thing or
Yeah, specific to home visits,
no for the school visits? There was,
school initiated.
yes, the
Okay.
school initiated.
Sure. Yeah, so school initiated, how we classified that is our school resource officers have very good relationships with, again, the SCEFs, the at-risk counselors, with the APs, the assistant principals. These are generally what happens when these administrators or school staff will contact our SROs directly and say, hey, can you come over? There's an issue that we can use your help in. So direct conversations with school staff, more or less kind of requesting our presence.
And that would be, I mean, obviously I understand what dispatched is versus that. So that's just more like we've seen more increase of kids not riding their bikes safely around the school. Can you come and talk to them?
Yeah, it could be that. And it certainly, there is a small number which has been that. I can say the very large majority usually revolves around discovery of vape pens or cannabis or things like that. But yes, your example would certainly fall within that classification.
Board member.
I don't know how many questions I have, so I'll just start. I was wondering, in the reach out to the parent community.
Sure.
If trainings with them to like spot social media issue potential or be protective of the kids on social media or other types of training. Are those done also offered in Spanish as well as English?
So the trainings that we've done, generally they are offered in English. However, we have the capability of offering them in Spanish. We do have a Spanish speaking officer. Moving forward, it's certainly something that we've discussed, especially with the energy of more parent facing education and presentations.
Yeah.
Certainly something that we can look into and discuss.
I think that would be very powerful versus even having simultaneous Spanish translation is actually having a Spanish speaking officer, a member of the community. I think that if resources allow, I think that would be great. I was wondering of the 116 school initiated calls, how many were actual legitimate calls and did you split it out by the ones where it's like, oh, we don't want to deal with that, so we're calling the PD versus we actually need the PD for that? Because I know in the past, the schools have sometimes been guilty of, we didn't want to deal with it, so we call the PD.
That data point I don't have. We weren't able to parse out which ones were, it's hard to verbalize that classification. Right now, that classification is just specific to administrators contacting us directly. Certainly, I think once we make our reporting system more robust, as we're able to kind of build that out, that's certainly something that we can look into as far as a data point, maybe things like year over year kind of trends or differences. Yeah. But certainly as we move forward in the school year, as we make that and build out that data set, that's certainly something that we can take a look into. But as of now, no, that has not been split out.
I'd be interested if that is a data point you can capture, what those trends look like. In terms of when you have program activities on the school, do you have any sense if the schools are advising the student bodies, especially a question for the high school,
Sure,
that you will be coming in? Do you have any sense if they're doing anything like that?
I think most of the programming that we do outside of Dreams and Futures actually occur within either our elementary schools or our middle schools. I think Dreams and Futures is primarily the ones that it is our biggest program. I mean, we do run it. This past year was at Mountain View High. Certainly the administrators are completely aware, all administrators for different summer camps, summer programs that are happening on campus at the time are aware. In addition to that, obviously we do have specific shirts that identify us specific to that program. But administrators on site at the high school specifically certainly do know our presence during the execution of that program.
And I'm just trying to do the math because proactive visits were 10, primarily elementary school, everything else. So that means so what I'm taking away is
Sure.
We're not at the high school really unannounced ever. Is that correct?
Yeah, anecdotally, I can tell you our presence at the high school has been significantly less than our presence at middle school or elementary school outside of Dreams and Futures.
Right.
We would like to look into more programming that we can offer to some of our older youths. Right now, our presence at specifically Mountain View High, significantly less.
Was that because of the community feedback or some other reason?
I think it's more programming. I think more of our programming is at this past school year was more directed towards earlier youths.
Okay.
So I think it was just kind of where our energy was and where we could put the most impact for our younger students.
I see.
Not so much any specific feedback whatsoever.
Okay. In the past year, there was like, we're going to go serve pizza at the high school, or we're going to walk around the quad and stuff. So I was curious if that had kind of reduced, because that's the implication from the data, and I was just curious about that.
Yeah, I don't think anecdotally that was a direct result of that. I think it's more energy and programming and really kind of where our efforts lied and this past school year, I think we really wanted to direct it more towards early youth and where we can create the most impact.
Chief, did you have something?
I think it was addressed, but I did want to just make sure that we're clear on the pizza providing at the school campus. There was some concern and some rumor that was kind of floating around that we had lined up and were handing out pizzas at the high school last school year.
It was at the middle school.
And we were actually invited to a program where part of asked to come for part of a presentation where there was pizza there. But just one.
I should have said 2 years ago when we brought it up as
Yeah.
like high school. I'm just seeing a dramatic decline in visits to the high school, and I'm just trying to piece it together in my mind.
Totally understood. I just wanted to make sure that we're on the same page about because that was a specific issue that had been brought up as a concern, that we were addressing that one specifically. It didn't happen as was kind of rumored, but exactly how you said, programmatically at the middle school invited to be there.
And then my last question is specific programs for young girls. I'm trying to get a sense, mentoring the gender split, because I think a lot of times like at risk can lean male.
Sure.
And I still remember a mother when I was doing SRO stuff, even though I wasn't on the subcommittee. I know you guys, I did that. And I was told, do you have female police officers in Mountain View? My daughter would
Yeah.
love to meet a female
Yeah.
police officer. And that stuck with me. And then I heard that in other places. And I was curious how many, because I don't even know how many girls would box. I don't know. I'm
Yeah.
curious about that.
No, it's a great question. To answer the last piece of your question, we've actually had many female youths run through our PAL boxing
Oh,
program.
good. Okay.
They tend to actually be some of our more committed ones throughout the program. So that's kind of a side note. We definitely do have a substantial female youth population, specifically with our Dreams and Futures program. I like to think that the split is almost about, and please don't quote me on this, it's really almost even between males and females.
Okay.
Even our mentoring program, it's certainly not completely skewed to the males. To answer the first part of your question, that's actually one of our goals, or one of the areas that we want to put more energy in for the 23-24 school year, is really expanding the mentoring program outside of just our school resource officers, right? Because I think within the mentoring program, within the participants, they know us so well. We have great relationships with them. And while that's great, and while I love going there and interacting with them, I think the opportunity and the benefit of having our other police officers that may not be as in tune with them, may not have kind of like these base relationships with them, be able to go in there and develop these relationships that really carry on throughout the school year and, hopefully the rest of their lives. We're looking into that, and that's one of the areas that we want to put more energy into. And that certainly does include female officers as well.
I think that would be great.
Yeah, I agree with you.
My final question is, I think Mountain View's SRO program is very different in a good way from SRO programs around the country. What are you guys doing to document your program and get the word out nationally of there can be, different roles for police officers on campus than traditional just shooter and security and tossing kids of color around?
So
What are you doing to get the word
So I
out?
agree with you in the fact that, I'm not just saying this because I'm the sergeant of the unit, but we truly have something special here. And when I look at nationally, from a national level, different school resource officer programs, they certainly aren't as complex as our program. While I do agree that physical security is important, not from acting as a security guard mindset and just staying on school campus, I think that's certainly one completely separate kind of area that we certainly don't want to put energy into. We value school security. We value school security when it comes to active shooter. That's an unfortunate reality of kind of the current world that we live in, that we'll always have to keep those skills on hand, but that's not our goal, right? Our goal is to empower the youth. Our goal is to hopefully make a difference in a child's life. How we're documenting it and moving forward, I think this coming year, we hope to go to what's called NASRO, which is the National Association of School Resource Officers. So that's a nationwide conference where SROs from all over not only the state, but all over the nation go and congregate. And I think one of the things that we want to get out of it is we want to see what people are doing. We want to see what kind of creative things that they're able to do that we can draw from, right? And I think on top of that, we're in a very unique area where not only can we draw from what people are doing, but we want to impart what we're doing.
Yeah.
Because when I look at different school resource officer programs across our state, specifically across different states, I think you're right. I think they're very, they can be very black and white, right? And I think our programming makes our program very, very special and unique. So that's one way that we're hoping to leverage it.
That sounds good.
Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, sure, I have a couple. I know that you guys are down technically a couple of officers, so I'm just wondering is there any discussion or possibility that you could headcount wise obtain another resource officer and maybe make it a female, since we don't have one of those currently? Or is that
Absolutely.
This feels like a question for Sergeant Chen. Member Frank, the adding in an additional officer position I would say that currently we don't have a need that's immediately needs to be filled. We don't have a vacancy, although we will soon in the unit. We don't have an empty vacancy. And we do need to look at, as we staff, how that lines up with the budget process and the budget cycle. Certainly, if there was significant requests from the public about expanding programs, we could look at what that would mean and what we would need to do to meet those needs. I feel like now a more realistic approach that would get us kind of not just more bang for our buck with people, SROs, but future SROs being developed, is to look at developing an internal program, kind of like we have a similar to our cyber digital forensics unit, where instead of immediately starting at a high level of performance, you work as a collateral assignment, partnering with people, in this case, it would be SROs, accompanying and going to training, being part of the programs, understanding the culture, both learning what's expected, but then the program kind of gets to see and gets exposure to those officers. That would be a much more realistic program or step towards increasing services through our youth services unit.
And don't you guys kind of do some of that already with the YSU involvement? You have other officers come and participate in some of those programs?
We do, Dreams and Futures specifically, but there's an area where we can get expanded access from our department, and we wouldn't select specifically based on gender.
Sure.
But certainly that gets us a broader net, cast a broader net, and gets us more access and more people interested in. We get to see who does really well in the position.
Sure. My next question is in your travels on campuses, do you guys have, I'm sure you have, are you finding that you are able to find and identify children who may be experiencing trouble at home, such as abuse, for instance? Do you have enough contact with the students to see those kinds of warning signs? Or are those harder to see in your limited contact?
Yeah, I think a lot of those, and I'll speak again from experience anecdotally from my SROs. I think a lot of those signs come from, the origin comes from other issues that tend to come up and are brought to our attention. Unfortunately, a lot of these things seem to go hand in hand with substance abuse, with behavioral issues that we see at school. And I think the SCEFs and the at-risk that we work with are so great in being able to really kind of ID like, hey, I think an SRO can really make a positive impact here. Generally through those contacts, we're able to see and understand maybe some more extensive issues that may arise at home. And that's where we're able to leverage again, our relationship with the school community, hopefully our trust with these kids that a lot of times we already know, we've already had relationships with. And I think that's the positive, where then we can leverage a home visit and see how things are going. A lot of times, again, through our programming and our regular contact with kids that we know, that's a big benefit because we know what the baseline behavior is, right? We know what a happy child looks like. We know what an engaged youth looks like. And through that kind of personal connection, we can see the opposite side to that. And that's one of the benefits of the regular programming.
And then to that end, so I think when my kid was in elementary school, there were like, I don't know, 70 languages spoken at his school. And so how do you guys mitigate that language barrier and still provide services to kids whose families you may not share language capabilities with in the office?
Yeah, no, that's certainly a great concern, of course. And, language barriers are always tough. I can tell you that as of now, we haven't run into, again, from my experience, that specific instance, but we do have resources to where if we did need to, if there was a specific language barrier, we have resources, whether it's outside agency, whether it's our language line, clearly not the best and most preferred solution to have to go through an intermediary, but we do have those resources to be able to handle those if that comes up. The best case scenario is I know the language. I mean, nothing builds bonds closer than shared language. I wish I could speak every language to where I could immediately build that kind of initial trust and bond with the youths. But if we need to, we have those resources that can at least for the meantime get us what we need.
Sure. In the order one of the Star Trek Universal.
Yeah. One of those comes up just this way.
And my last question is at least at the elementary school level, you mentioned the proactive visits. So I have a lot of experience with the program, and some of my fondest memories are literally hanging out with Captain Yeager, who was not in the program, but just happened to be at a lot of the events. And sometimes it would be, during PE or like immediately after school, running around with the kids, kickball, other games, basketball, foursquare, all this kind of stuff. Are you guys looking to do those kinds of activities? Or are you looking to do more structured things?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a mix of both.
Okay.
We certainly have our programming, which we want to thrive, and we always want to support with our staffing. But there's always one of those days where you don't have something going on in the afternoon. And personally, I could speak from my own experience. I'll throw on my uniform and I'll go out to one of the elementary schools. And again, I talk about symbiotic relationships. You work in something so stressful. It's not only fun for a child at that age to see someone in uniform, but it's refreshing for us too. So not only do we want to continue doing that, we enjoy doing that. Also, keep in mind that a lot of the events that we go to, whether it's like a bike rodeo or something fun, like we go to like a Vargas fun run, for instance, we still classify those as school initiated because they request our presence there. But there still is the level of us, hey, look, I got some time on my hand. I'll swing by the elementary school or a summer camp. There are a lot of schools in our district that don't have as much attention when it comes to SROs and issues that come up, right? But at the same time, we don't want to neglect those schools too, right? We want to make sure that they get all the support that they may need. And like to your point, we also want to make sure that the kids know that we're here for them, and not just from a response standpoint too, right? I think that's so important as well. So certainly I can tell you that energy is placed in both.
Thank you, Chair.
Just in general, an attaboy to having an SRO program that isn't like a guy sitting in an office kind of marking time for his retirement.
Yeah.
With regards to 154 hours is a lot of training. The things you train make sense to me. How has that program developed? Has it been like improved over the years? Like,
Yeah.
did you start with a basic and just expanded?
That's a great question. So when you look at the school resource officer role, there certainly are, again, when you look at roles like detectives or certain other positions within the department, you always have those core courses or trainings that you do, right? As a detective, you take a 40-hour ICI course on burglary or, robbery or things like that. There are those subsets of trainings for school resource officers. There's a standard SRO training. Outside of that, I'd like to think that our unit is very progressive when it comes to understanding what the current issues and trends are that affect our local schools and really pairing our training against that, right? We want to make sure, it's one thing to always train active shooter every year. It's important, I get it. It's one thing to train, marijuana, for instance, right? But we also have to understand that kids these days are not kids when I was a kid, I'll tell you that much, right? We don't have the same problems. We don't have the same substances. There's not the same pressures or stressors. I sure as heck didn't have social media. So these new things we have to keep in mind, right? And that's how we grow our abilities. That's how we grow our skills. And it would be amiss for us to be ignorant to that. And I think that's what drives a lot of our training selection moving forward. And that's how we keep it relevant, really, I think is the best word to use.
And then the goal makes sense to possibly expand and allow other officers in the department to facilitate, have a female on female interaction. That current SRO is there a minimum manning that you have to have with, on patrol, and the SROs contribute to that? Or are the SROs assigned to the school and don't necessarily go out on patrol?
Yeah, so I could tell you responsibility wise, our SRO's primary responsibility is SRO duty.
Yeah.
So they're not used as what's the right word, like a reserve unit. There's certainly, that's not the intention of that unit. So of course, if there is a big event that happens to happen that requires more officers, maybe a critical incident, they may be involved, but that's
If it was
certainly
just a
not-
general staffing shortage that required hiring like an overtime shift, would you say get an SRO to fill that before you hired OT? Or would you hire an overtime guy?
I can let
I'll jump in with this one. So as a general point of reference, we would not be drawing from our school resource officer services unit to fill patrol staffing to prevent overtime. We have a budget that includes the need for an anticipated overtime. We also have other units that can assist and adjust. That doesn't mean, like Sergeant Shen said, that we don't help out. They certainly do. But the purpose of that unit is to be both available and present for the schools, our youth and community, and we get so much value by having them be available. So we can't have what you saw presented today if we draw from them regularly whenever there's a staffing shortage that requires an overtime shift.
Makes sense. And then in order to, if you were to try to tap existing members when you had like overstaffing, to contribute to like, mentoring a kid at the school, do you think you'd have to train like everybody with that level of training, or do you think they could just kind of be like a mentor without going through the 154 hours of training?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think certainly to have more involvement from non-SROs, not necessarily, they don't have to necessarily run through the entire, 40, 80-hour trainings, but I think there is something to be said about being selective about what type of officer is being introduced and I don't know if leveraged is the right word, but leveraged.
Resourced.
Resourced for the relationships with our kids, right? We want to make sure that it's someone that, I think the biggest one is wants to do it. Right?
Yeah.
Our SROs want to be SROs, and we don't want to sacrifice that passion for someone that just wants to happen to kind of go hang out with kids for a little bit. I mean, that's a great reason, but we want more than that. We're looking for more than that, right? And I think I think it was the lieutenant or the chief's point, we're really looking at that role beyond just hey, look, here's a new officer. These are our prospective new school resource officers. And that's certainly something that we don't take lightly, especially with the program that we currently have. So.
Okay. And I think I had maybe one last thing. Remember to the the YSU programs that you have a lot. Those have just been tagged on over the years. You decide, oh, we have a guy that knows boxing. Like, is that kind of how that's done?
So so a lot of these programs there's a lot of history behind them.
Yeah.
Dreams and Futures goes back decades. I mean,
Certainly.
Wow, okay.
Now boxing goes back decades.
It's legendary
Yeah.
nationwide.
Yeah, I mean, it's these are things that they're certainly not one-off programs. They've
Yeah.
been proven to work. They've been proven for, I think the big one is engagement.
Yeah.
Right? The last thing when I think about YSU programs is, and this is kind of just how I personally put it, is I don't want it to be a Band-Aid program. I don't want to say, hey, bikes are fun. Let's ride bikes for a day, right? I want it to mean more. And I think a lot of them are empowering the youth, right? Making sure that they have a space where it means more than just kind of a fun activity with a cop. Well, that's fun. We look for more. And these programs, I think that these are the tried and true programs. And, shout out to SRO Delira. He came out with some new ones called Battle of the Belt, where each specific school creates their own flag football team. And it's a bracket system, right? So not only is it fun to play flag football, but there's a sense of pride for your school, right? And once you go through the playoffs and you win the championships, right? That school has kind of like a WWF belt that you hang out, right? To me, that's a tried and proven program. So we're looking for those. And that's not to say that we're going to have some that maybe may not be as successful as others, but that's how you keep implementing, you keep kind of evolving with each one and seeing how they go. So they're very, very storied programs.
Yeah, I mean, the participation rate is remarkable. That kind of tells us.
Dreams and Futures to me is it's an incredible program. So.
And then just the different, I'll guess the difference between support, wellness, and intervention. Intervention, I take it, you think something's going to happen, you're going to try to stop it.
Yeah.
Support and wellness.
So I'll be honest with you, that was a tricky one to parse out. Again, I think there's a lot of bleed over between those classifications. So that really took looking at each, it was time consuming, looking at each home visit, looking at the summary and really picking out which stood out the most.
Yeah.
So again, when we talk about intervention, there's aspects of wellness and support for both of those, right? But the big one that stood out was, maybe there was like a threat that was made that ultimately the kid didn't mean it, but that was the overwhelming nexus of where that came from.
Yeah.
A self-admittedly very difficult one to parse out. I think that's the best that we
did. Thanks.
Sure.
Thank you.
I'm sorry.
I have one last question.
Oh, okay.
I just have one last question. It's probably a little bit controversial, but my personal anecdotal experience with administration at one of the high schools is that when they are doing their interactions with students, they tend to sort of, their interactions, in my experience, lean toward a certain set of the student population. And I feel like that might, because you guys are then being called in to support that, that it may skew your nose, but are you guys keeping numbers on the demographics of who you're making contact with? And is that part of your data set?
It's not a data set that's specifically, it's a data set that we can obtain with what we currently have. And I think that's driving forward what makes data collection so important for us, is we want to make sure that we're able to efficiently and accurately, most importantly, get that data. So I think we can implement it. I'm optimistic about it. I think exactly like you mentioned, those data points is what makes that such a high priority on personally my list when it comes to reporting. So to answer your question, it's not one that's automatically captured. It's certainly one that we can look back in the incidents and parse out. But moving forward, it is one that I think we want to kind of automatically include once we start entering that data in after a contact.
Yeah, I just feel like it's an important one, only because those are negative community focused interactions. And I feel like they're not necessarily driven by your work, they're driven by your response to the school. And I've had discussions with their process in this arena. or at least at the school level. But I think you guys are sort of, held hostage by their activities. But you are doing this work, and it is affecting one, in my opinion, one group of students more than others. And so I just wanted to know how, how can you, is there a way to, to make that less negative or make it better than it is? Because I don't think it's that positive.
And certainly from a departmental perspective, if we are seeing things that we're not comfortable with or patterns that we don't like or appear concerning, we have the ability to intervene, to speak with district administrators, to escalate or redirect those actions. We're not required to do something that we don't believe is appropriate just because we're school resource officers or youth services program. That doesn't bypass all of the other things that ethics and expectations that we have in our officers, nor that they have in themselves. So we don't work for the district, we work for the city of Mountain View, and we're beholden to our community. Not to say that there's anything untoward, but certainly if there's something that doesn't fit our city's ethical standards, then that's not something that we're going to support.
Very good, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Can I do one last thing?
Yeah.
Have you seen anyone that's participated in any of your youth services programs actually become a member of the department?
Yes, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we've had numerous members that have gone through our Explorer program, which I'm thinking I glossed over, but numerous members of our Explorer programs have gone on to not only become police officers, they've gone on to become firefighters.
Yeah, okay.
We've had, so one of our SROs, SRO Guevara, I always say this, he always makes you feel like the most unpopular person and uncool person, because as he goes out in the public, he's always contacted by past members of Dreams and Futures mentoring programs. And he has that story to tell. He has such cool stories because these kids tell him what they're doing. I think one of them ended up in CAL FIRE. A lot of them ended up in positions where I'd like to think that they didn't think that they could ultimately land it, right? So we certainly see those success stories. I think that's definitely what keeps us motivated.
Yeah. Thanks.
All right, I have questions. I'm going to go simplest answer to more complex answer. When you were talking about SRO visits to the school sites, in the YSU program related visits, does that, I know in previous conversations with the SROs, they have mentioned that sometimes they're checking in on students that have been in the programs, on their goals or maybe they've been struggling. Does that number, the YSU program related visits, does that number include checking in on kids that have been in the YSU program?
If they are actively in the program, I would say that would include that, yes. Yes.
Okay. You also mentioned this, but I was thinking about something during my day as you were explaining this answer. So I apologize. Can you please explain to me when is a home visit utilized as an intervention and why would an SRO do that instead of us?
Sure. So again, I think it kind of goes back to our classification system. That one certainly, again, was very difficult to parse out. I think it was important for us to do it. And I think moving forward, we can probably do it more accurately. But when I think about intervention, to me, and how it reflects the home visits that we've done, that's the more serious potential, I don't want to say threats. I think they originate as possible safety threats. So it could be a youth that's going through a mental crisis that unfortunately says something similar to, and I'm not quoting anything specific, that, I want to shoot up the school or something similar to that. That's how we classify what I kind of classify as an intervention. Again, I think there's a lot of bleed over when it comes to wellness or support. In the end, really, when it comes down to it, they probably all kind of bleed over together, but that's when I really kind of use that rare classification of intervention, of making sure that it's not a viable or credible threat, making sure not only the school is safe, but that particular youth is safe, checking in on how everything is going from a familial standpoint. That's kind of how we classify that. Hopefully that clears it up a little bit.
Thank you. And then how does your unit practice, model, or facilitate restorative justice, and how do the districts support?
Sure. Great question. So how we practice and model restorative justice is when we get called into an incident, we have the mindset of, we don't jump directly to the mindset of, okay, what's the quickest way to resolve this? We all know the quickest way to resolve an issue is a JCR or an arrest. We know that the vast majority of those is not the appropriate, or let's call it as it is, the right solution for the youth. We go in with the mindset of, if a youth does something, let's say for instance, gets in a fight, right? We want to make sure we go in with a counseling mindset to help the youth understand what they did, understand the impact of what they did, not only to themselves, but potentially to the victim, and how they can avoid these types of behaviors in the future. A lot of times these youths are also referred over to our programming. Again, optional, it's never required, right? It's for instance, they can be referred over to PAL boxing to divert some energy. PAL boxing is an area where we've seen a lot of youths open up, right? Through the expenditure of their energy, through their passion or growing passion for the sport. That's when you see it. It's never an immediate thing. As easy as I wish it would be, it's usually a thing that takes place over days or even weeks. So we go in with the mindset of, even if it is a pretty clear law violation, we don't want to utilize, when it comes down to it, honestly, we don't want to utilize an arrest, right? That's the last thing that we want to do. And I think that's, I think the data speaks for it. That's really saved for what we like to think is no other option, or an exhaustion of options. We really want to have more understanding around their actions and what the effects of their actions may be.
I'm not sure how do the districts support you in facilitating that restorative, the practices you just?
Yeah, I think the main way that, I think it's easy in the fact where we have the autonomy to be able to do that, to be able to make that decision. I think in our conversations with a lot of district members, I think they share the same views. Again, when it comes to administrative handlings of certain aspects, we do not get involved in that whatsoever. But I think it's a shared view. And on top of that, we have the independence to be able to at least kind of carry out that mindset.
And I'd also add that it's also highlighted in our MOU, the clear separation, and making sure that that's very clear. The memorandum of understanding, I'm sorry.
No, I was giving that look because I was like, what part was right there? I'm sorry.
The understanding that we handle criminal matters, it's separated.
Separation.
Yeah, it's a good one.
Just checking. Does anyone else have questions before I open up to public comment?
I have one more. When we were in MVPDX, we had a discussion with the, I think it's the Santa Clara County DA's office. And so whenever you guys actually do have to, you don't have a choice and you have to effect an arrest, you guys have resources within that department to sort of, at least where it's appropriate, assist the student from necessarily having to.
Of course. So that was Deputy District Attorney Angela Alvarado, who was assigned as a community prosecutor, who presented at the MVPDX session, cohort 1, I believe.
Yeah.
And she spoke about the collaboration and the approach that the district attorney's office uses with juvenile justice, and that it is very much not focused on punitive punishments of our youth, but looking at larger, broader pictures about how to address the underlying issues, the trauma associated to the juvenile, to the youth, and what types of court mandated either therapy or restorative justice, probation, community service, and the types of those community service that will best suit the juvenile and the community that they were violated. So it is definitely collaborative. I will say that the juvenile probation department is also very much a partner in that and is a great advocate for our youth and looking at what is the best fit. They do a full spectrum analysis on who the child is and what their past history is, what their traumas are when they make those assessments on their recommendations. So it's certainly, we are an important part of that chain, but we're just one link in it. The district attorney's office is phenomenal, as is juvenile probation department.
And the pile on that a little bit, our Santa Clara County Juvenile Probation Department, they actually collaborate with the Youth Advisory Council. So that Youth Advisory Council also does consist of formerly justice engaged youth, and they have a say or a weigh in on practices, procedures. So I do like to think that they have a similar mindset.
Thank you. Okay, now I'm done. I'm sorry.
All right, would any member of the public like to provide comment on this item? If so, please submit a blue card, or if on Zoom, click the raise hand feature or dial *9 on your phone.
We have two online. Okay, and the first is Bruce England.
Thank you. Bruce England speaking for Mountain View Coalition for Police Reform and Accountability, or MVCPRA. Very quick, it's actually a question, so whether you're able to answer it or not, I'll leave up to you. But we know that the SRO subcommittee was managed by Melvin before his departure. And so it's unclear to us who will be handling those duties. And maybe we could infer that from what you've covered tonight. And I myself actually had to come in late. I didn't catch the beginning of it. I will listen back. But it would be helpful to us to know that the subcommittee is going to carry forward and who will be handling that from a staff perspective. Thanks.
If a member of the PSAP would like an answer, we can do that after public comment.
Oh, we could move on to the next speaker.
Okay, it's Tim McKenzie.
Hi, all. Thanks for the informative report. I'll note, as someone who's been engaged with PSAB for the whole the process and with the relationship to SROs that actually kind of catalyzed PSAB. That was one of the big things. Throughout the process, it was very clear that SROs are not for school shootings. That's sort of separate from the policing aspect, like the police writ large kind of handle that, and SROs aren't necessarily meant for that. So the emphasis in the report is something that surprised me a little bit. Also, throughout the engagement with the process, I thought the whole idea with the MOUs and things has been to have structured activities on campus. So the proactive visits, as they're referred to, in where there's just meet and greets on campus that were unannounced. That seems kind of counter to things that have been discussed in the past. And it's absolutely unacceptable that there was a student firing a beanbag shotgun. That was hidden at the end, towards the end of the report. Like, that is a huge safety violation. I'm glad that I don't have kids that are in the school system right now that have that sort of thing going on. That's just, I really don't have the words to it for it. It's not acceptable at all. And I want to echo what I heard one of the board members say earlier about the importance of collecting demographic information for the students that officers follow up with at home. Thank you.
Are there any other members of the public making or wanting to make comment? Okay, would staff like to respond to any of the questions that are raised?
Sure, I'd be happy to respond to the question asked about who is staffing the SRO subcommittee. There is not an SRO subcommittee. The work plan item that subcommittee was created to complete has been completed with the assessment and set of recommendations that went to the city council last year. And that then culminated in the work of the procedure manual and the MOUs and the creation of an annual report, which is staffed by members of our youth services unit to produce that annual report and come back to the PSAB each year.
I will now bring this back for PSAB discussion. Do any board members have comments? I just want to see if there were all hands. Okay.
I just wanted to comment a little bit about the PAL program. I remember my father working with or discussing some kind of similar program, like as far back as the 80s, because he was doing this a long time. He was doing this kind of meeting in the 70s. And so I remember kids, being in that program way back then, and him asking me if I wanted to do it, and me saying no because I played a different sport and didn't really want to get punched. And if you look now, you can regularly see the success of this program. There are kids around the country who regularly, end up at the Junior Olympic trials and the regular Olympic trials who originated from a PAL boxing program. So I think it's really good work. And we know sports teaches kids a lot of things outside of sports. So thank you.
Other comments from the board? I'll make a comment. I appreciated how much work and detail went into this report. I too would like to see a breakdown of demographic data for the contacts made. I think that, yeah, vaping is, dare I say, an epidemic right now. Being a high school teacher, like, can you guys not? Anyway, yeah, there's going to need to be more information, more campaigning around not just marijuana, but also nicotine use and the dangers of those. Because it really is, I mean, 200 plus in a year, that's a lot confiscated. Not so many comments, thank you.
It's only like 180 school days, right?
Yeah. That's more than one per day. In that case, if there are no more comments from the board, do we move on to the next item? Okay. Thank you to our board report. We're moving on to 5.2 PSAB Mental Health Crisis Response Subcommittee report on feedback about North County Trust and MCRT. This item, I guess I'm the last subcommittee member left here that is part of that subcommittee. I was not planning on delivering the update, but I will deliver a verbal update to you all. We met to discuss our scope as proposed in the fiscal year 23-24 work plan to support the implementation of trust and MCRT 988 and behavioral services. The director of North County Trust, Corona Brown, who we have met before, she attended that meeting. We talked about the current status of the implementation of trust, what data is being collected, some of the limitations that we have to collecting that data that we have been interested in. And Bindu will be making a guest appearance at our next PSAB meeting in October to give you more details, a fuller update to the rest of you all, so you can also ask your own questions. We will have updates from Trust, directly from Trust twice a year. And we, as a subcommittee, will continue to have meetings with Bindu herself. In addition to this update, I hear Chief Canfield will be providing an update about efforts to coordinate dispatch between calls to 988 and 911. Would you like, I'll hand it off to you.
Certainly, happy to provide an update. Just for background, the 988 number is a national number that is essentially, you can think of it as a suicide hotline or crisis hotline number that you can call. In California and in our state, or in our county rather, it is a dispatch center essentially for more than just emergency crises being negotiated over a phone. Our 988 center in the county is capable of coordinating and sending out trust, MCRT, uplift services, significant community partners through the county. So they are more than just that kind of traditional suicide hotline. So they have a unique position in the county, and to look at, the department is interested in actively pursuing how to divert potential 911 mental health calls from a police response and looking at other alternative methods. Thus the background and why we're looking at utilizing that 988 call center. Currently, the center does not operate like a police department dispatch center. So a call into 988, which is a national number, gets routed. It gets routed into the county based on kind of a series of numbers that the caller would enter indicating where they're from and based on their area. The only information that 988 receives is the area code where the call is from. That presents some challenges and difficulties in sharing information from 988 to the police department, and that is actively being reviewed by the state. In fact, for background on our progress, we are pausing the procedures that we have in place at the moment, or that we've been working on with 988 through our Tri-Cities. So Palo Alto, Los Altos, and Mountain View Police Department. We share a dispatch system, so we all dispatch on the same software. Currently, we were very actively working on that system for how to transition calls to 988 and have them transition calls back to us. Because the state is upgrading the systems so that they will work more like a 911 call center, we're pausing to see what the direction is going to be and what the capabilities are, so that we don't create processes and procedures only to then stop them and then have to reevaluate. So there's a brief pause, hold on pause on how we proceed as we evaluate and as we receive information from the state in more direction. Likely, in the direction that we were moving, is that we are going to take calls that don't involve violence, that don't involve weapons, jumping off of buildings, or a need for medical aid. Those that come into the 911 center will be sent back to, routed to the 988 call center. There is a law enforcement specific line currently, so that number our dispatchers would send it to. But before that's formalized, we do need to see what the direction is going to be from the larger governing body of the state and what capabilities they're going to require and help support for that 988 center. So it's a long answer for, we're on a hopefully a brief pause, but we're very motivated, the Tri-Cities, the 3 city police departments and city government, city managers' offices in moving this process forward.
Thank you, Chief. If I might, I think the fact that we have our police department involved with the other 2 agencies is a testament to the fact that we as a city have been so engaged around supporting alternative mental health crisis response programs, supporting trust through the work of the PSAB, and also the federal earmark funding that we got to enhance the trust program so that it is even more effective. We have at the staff level regular meetings with the county to support the success of 988 and trust and MCRT. And I think that it meant, the county really sees Mountain View stepping up. And the work that we were trying to do at a regional level, it's a good sign that they're now undertaking that work at the state level. But I don't want to lose sight of the fact that we were stepping up and ready to do that work even before they were looking at those kinds of protocols at the state.
Absolutely. And I will say, if this becomes a longer drawn out bureaucratic evaluation, or if it gets tied into larger budgetary concerns, we are absolutely motivated to partner and continue moving forward. We just want to make sure we do it the best way, most sustainable way.
Thank you both. Do board members have any questions before I open this item to public comment? Board member Sen.
Hi, yeah, I'm sorry. I just, can I get a little information? So you said the 988 number receives the information, but the area code from the phone that is called. So say somebody calls from outside of that, how does that, I know if you call 911 and you have an outside number or however, so they can reach out to another agency in that area. So how does that reflect with 988 specifically to like Mountain View, et cetera?
It's a great question. What would happen, let's say you had a 650 number on your cell phone, but you were living in New York City. The Santa Clara County 988 center would get that phone call routed to them.
Okay.
That's problematic, and it certainly is an area for improvement in the system, and I believe that's one of the areas that is spurring a lot of attention and needs to be shifted at the state level, because to create a call center that's data in, it requires data systems and access, and you can't just make a 911 call center essentially. So it has to be mandated and legislated in.
Okay, yep, that makes sense. Okay, thank you.
Similarly, they can't transfer, they don't have a number to transfer to us. If it was 988, they can't transfer to our 911 center, and then we wouldn't know what information, we don't know what number is calling or what the location is of that phone.
So currently, we're just waiting for data so we can implement something on a legislative level to.
So there's guidelines coming out from the state on how best to proceed. So we're waiting for the guidelines from the state as they're directing what the call centers are going to be required to retain, and then looking at funding mechanisms. So we're waiting for direction.
Okay.
But it is actively being provided, is what our understanding, and speaking with 988.
Okay, understood. Thank you, Chief.
So there's no discussion in any of this on including the EMTs or the fire department EMS folks in the response portion of this. So for instance, if you guys had to respond to someone in need, it's you guys responding or trust responding, but the EMS folks don't participate in that.
If it's strictly a mental health crisis with no apparent medical need,
right,
then our county EMS services don't respond just because of that. That I think in maybe some jurisdictions, different states, that may be done differently, but that's not the model for our region.
Okay.
If there are no further questions from the board, would any member of the public like to provide comment on this item? If so, please submit a blue card, or if on Zoom, click the raise hand feature or dial *9 on your phone.
We have one online, Tim McKenzie.
Hey, thanks for the update from the subcommittee. It's great to have updates from active committees, and I think the mental health response work that you guys are doing is some of the most important work you're doing. It's great to hear about 988 and get updates on the local things. I'll confess I haven't looked, but if there's like a flow chart of how this information works that could be put online somewhere, that could be useful. And I think hearing this conversation, it might be useful to think about sort of dispatch and routing and how things go out. From previous report, we heard how infrequently weapons are used by Mountain View police officers. How many times when there is a call that comes in, do we need to send someone with a weapon to go out to it? And we're being very thoughtful about that with regards to mental health response and looking for the right tool for the job when things come up. And I don't see why we can't think about that more broadly. I just want to plant that seed. Thank you.
Any other members of the public? All right, I will now bring this back for PSAB discussion. Do any board members have comments? Seeing as there do not seem to be any comments, we'll move on to item 6, PSAB staff comments, questions, and reports. The next item is board/staff comments, questions, and committee reports. No action will be taken on any questions raised by the PSAB at this time. Do any PSAB members or staff have comments or questions?
I just have a comment. I am making this comment on behalf of my friend member IR, who is not here, but I'm sure she would want to say it, which is, as you guys consider your, and I don't agree with this position, but as you guys consider your activity on campus that is proactive or not structured, that you consider those visits to campus very carefully. And because I know that her position is that when you go to campus, it should be for a reason. And that it should be structured and that would benefit students. I think that's her position. And so I just would ask on her behalf that you guys consider that. And then on the other side, I would also ask that you consider that I know that because I was talking about, children who may be under some kind of stress or pressure at home, that you guys find ways to, interact with students so that you can see those kids and give them those resources, because it's my opinion that the kids who are under-resourced are the kids who are the ones who need you the most, and the kids who have plenty of resources are the ones who don't necessarily want to see you on campus. So there's a conundrum there to deal with, and I just would ask that you continue fighting the good fight and doing what you can do to mitigate that as best you can. Thank you.
I have some questions from the public about we have a lot of subcommittees, let's be real. And we also have like multiple names for some of them. So there's sometimes like some confusion on like what the formal names of subcommittees are and what their obligations are. And so there's a request to clearly name those in the current work plan. And to just clarify that information, because like there's like the traffic stop data subcommittee, but like is that like RIPA? Is that traffic stop? Like what are we formally calling ourselves? That is the feedback question. Okay, so I hear it's RIPA. People would just like to know more formally what that is.
So if I may? After the city council adopts the work plans for all advisory bodies, which they will have on their agenda on September 12th, we will have at our October meeting the opportunity to appoint members to subcommittees, and that would be a perfect time to, in that report, to be clear about the names of all the subcommittees.
I think that's also the perfect time. Yeah. Right. The other members do not seem to have other comments, and staff also does not.
Do not.
Well,
I have a comment.
oh, go for it.
Yes, I like your name of a traffic stop committee rather than a RIPA committee, because every time I looked at it, I'd have to go look it up again, even though I was on the committee.
I thought it was originally the traffic stop committee, so I was confused.
It was RIPA when I was on it that I constantly had to look it up, and I still don't remember what RIPA stands for. So I think it would be better to have something a little clearer as the name.
Someone on the subcommittee is also confused. So anyway, I'm sorry, was that?
That's the end of the comment. Yes.
We will now move on to the final item of tonight's agenda, adjournment. This meeting is adjourned at 9:00 exactly PM. That's my go. Yay.